Okay, well, good evening, vinyl community. I think it's been about a month since I last did a video. So I'm going to do heavy rotation as usual. I'm not really going to talk about Record Store Day. I bought a lot of records last Record Store Day. Still haven't listened to all of them. I want to kind of wait until I've kind of gone through the whole batch before I talk about them. Although there's been some great stuff, that's definitely true. So I'm gonna start off by talking about a new release. I knew this album was coming. Lo and behold, I was surprised to find that the new Boards of Canada album dropped yesterday. So the new album is called Inferno. So I listened to it yesterday on Qobuz. First impression, well, first of all, massive Boards of Canada fan, massive fan. First impression, I really liked it. I'm gonna say there was a long gap. Oh yeah, by the way, I've ordered the vinyl. Obviously, it hasn't shown up yet, but I had listened to it on Qobuz. I've only listened to it once so far. First impression, I really liked it. I thought it was probably first impression better than their last album. So just real quickly, there was a long gap between um, before they dropped this album, the last album we got from Boards of Canada that came out in 2013. Hang on one second. So 2013 was the last time we got an album from Boards of Canada. Um, and 13 and there was a long gap before Tomorrow's Harvest showed up. Now it's been 13 years till Inferno shows up. I'll say that for both of these albums, a long gap, and then they put out something, and your first impression is like, what the hell is this? You can tell it's Boards of Canada, but their sound, it's like what have they been up to for the last couple of years? And in this case, they dropped this beast that was like very. It sounded kind of like 80s synthesizer. Seemed to kind of be a very strong influence on their sound. And I'm not even sure if I know how to describe the new album other than kind of like this one. They've revamped their sound. There's some new textures, but you can tell it's Boards of Canada. Um, First impression, like I said, I really liked it. I've never upgraded this to vinyl. I probably should someday. This one, I've been listening to this sucker for 13 years now, and it's really grown on me. The only thing I would say is maybe a knock on this album was that it's very front loaded. Like all the strongest tracks seem to be kind of at the start. And by the time you're getting towards the end of the album, your attention's starting to wander. And a lot of really strong tracks are at the start. And there's this crazy YouTube video out there where some guy says that there's all kinds of weird hidden messages in this album, and there's clues to what the theme is and the song titles. And this dude, it's a strange YouTube video out there, swears that this album, the sequence that you get on the album is not the true sequence. That the band, that the album is meant to be listened to. Like they say, there's 14 tracks. Track 7 is halfway through the album. The way that you're supposed to listen to it is track 1, then track 8, then track 2, then track 9. And I did put together a playlist that did that. And I would say I think the sequencing was better when I did that. I love this album. I love the new album. I'm looking forward to listening to it some more. Um, anyway, enough of that. Boards of Canada. Another guy that dropped a new album. This is the new album from Jose Gonzalez. Jose is an interesting guy. He's apparently big in Europe. I believe he's from Brazil, somewhere in South America. I don't know. But apparently he's big in Europe, and he's like no one's heard of him here in the States. A fantastic artist. He has played around with different styles, but classic Jose is just one guy and an acoustic guitar, voiced like an angel. And on this album, he returns more to that style of music, more like what we come to expect from Jose, and he returns to that format on this album. I This guy should be huge. I think it's an absolute shame that more people don't listen to Jose. Um, Another album I revisited in the last couple of weeks, an artist that I also think is hugely underrated, Kelly Stoltz. Believe he's out of the Bay Area. He's, oh God, how would you describe him? He's just like a smart ass hipster that signed to the Sub Pop label. But God, he writes some catchy melodies. I know his big influence is Echo and the Bunnymen, one of my favorite bands. This is, I think, his best album, but he's also very prolific. He's got a hell of a lot of albums. There are a bunch of them I've never even heard. And you wouldn't have heard him because you never see his albums in record stores. But anyway, this one was on Sub Pop. I think this is maybe a little better known. I think it's his best album, but he's got many good albums. So keep your eyes and ears open for Kelly Stoltz. I think he's insanely underrated. Another album I discovered, I've only listened to this once. Uh, Nazareth, No Mean City. Oh, and look at this, it's a white label promo. So I think Nazareth is a hugely underrated band. I mean, just some solid 70s hard rock. Hair of the Dog is the famous album. That's the one. If anyone owns an album by Nazareth, they own Hair of the Dog. It's got Love Hurts on it. This is a couple albums later. I'm gonna say this is even better than Hair of the Dog. This album blew me away. It was I've picked up quite a few of their albums at this point, and this one is I wasn't expecting it to be as good as Hair of the Dog. I was surprised. I thought this one's better. But I could just go on and on. But I love Nazareth. I think they're hugely underrated. So what else have I been listening to? I've been listening to a lot of new wave and a lot of synth pop, and I'll show you some of the ones that I've been listening to. Human League, Dare, just great, just great. I got this album for $1 at a garage sale. New album for me, and it's an Abbey Road half speed master. I'd never heard The Hurting by Tears for Fears. Possibly their best album. I was blown away by how good this sucker was. Another '80s band I'd heard of but never actually checked out. Bronski Beat. Surprisingly, also very good. Really enjoyed this album. The album's called Truth Dare Double Dare. But the real heavy hitter, the one that really blew me away, Duran Duran. Now, I've always liked Duran Duran, but I've never actually heard Rio, their most popular album. That's one I'd never heard. Part of the reason was I was holding off. I wanted to get an OG. I tend to prefer originals when possible, and surprisingly hard album to find. I looked high and low, could not find a nice clean copy of Rio. People maybe it wasn't even that I was finding scratched up copies of Rio. I just didn't see this album floating around anywhere. Surprisingly, for such a popular album, just very hard to find. Eventually, I paid $25 for a very good, I'd say this is a VG Plus easily, original copy. It sounds great. And it's probably their best album. It's an absolute banger. This album sold like crazy back in the 80s, and I can understand why. I've listened to this sucker a couple times in the last couple weeks, and blown away by how freaking good it is. Um, One other thing I'm going to touch on. I have recently started being more interested in. I mean, I've collected a fair amount of bootlegs over the years, and when I go to record shows, I see these vendors that sell, bootleg pressings or vinyl pressings of recordings that were bootlegs. And sometimes it can be hard to find, like, famous shows. There'll be like they're bootlegs, so sometimes you don't know exactly what source you're getting and stuff like this. I've been wanting a really good copy of Pink Floyd's Peel Sessions from 1971, the famous John Peel session where they play Echoes. It did get a commercial release a couple of years ago as part of that box set that Pink Floyd put out of all the all of the BBC sessions, some studio outtakes, and all that. Um, and I wasn't that crazy about the transfer that was done. Um, I remember about a year or two ago, I bought a bootleg of it. It sounded like crap. Decided once again to try again to see if I could get another. And I got this one, which is on, what is the name of this flagrantly illegal record label? It's called Expensive Woodland Recordings. But this was a very fine sounding transfer. The vinyl was very clear, very clean. I'm sorry, it's a clear vinyl pressing. Vinyl was dead quiet. They did a good job of transferring it. I don't know how the hell they did it. I don't know how guys do that with these recordings. But yeah, I might check out some more of these. The other classic Floyd bootleg is the other Peel session from 1970. So I'd like to see if I could find a good vinyl pressing of that. This one I was very happy with. It sounds great. I also, years ago, another Floyd, one of their more famous bootlegs, I found this. I got this sucker, which was a 2 CD set of the famous Concertgebouw concert from Amsterdam, 1969. For years, I knew this show. I had a kind of a butchered 1 CD version of this show with just bunches, huge gaps in the show. 1 CD. Then I found this, which was the complete show spanning 2 CDs. They did a really good job with the transfer. I've never heard one that sounded better than this one did. Um, so yeah, I might be checking out some more bootlegs. Who knows? Um, so I'm going to continue with something that I started in the last video, which is a countdown of my top 25 artists. Um, so last video I did numbers 25 and 24, which were Zeppelin and Frank Zappa. I don't know where Zeppelin really fits on my list, uh, other than they're Zeppelin, they're great, and I felt like they needed to be on there somewhere, but there are other bands that frankly I like more than Zeppelin. I put them at the very tail end. So, number 23, this is going to surprise some people. It's probably going to piss some people off. I'm going with Fish. I love Fish. I think Fish, what can you say about Fish? They never, they ended up kind of in some ways inheriting the mantle of the jam band music when Jerry Garcia passed in 1995. They never asked to be put in a position of filling in the role for what the Grateful Dead used to do. They never asked for that. They never felt like they could fill in those shoes. But a lot of people were looking for what they used to be able to find at Dead concerts, and people started flocking to Fish shows. Um, for at least a decade, all I knew about Fish was I had this album, um, Billy Breathes. Part of why I got it was because it was produced by Steve Lillywhite, the same guy that produced the early U2 albums and quite a number of other albums. I listened to this sucker a lot for a decade, and that was all I knew about Fish was this album. Then in the early 2000s, I got back into listening to the Dead again after taking a very long break from the Dead's music, and I started trading Dead shows again. And also, while I was trading shows, started checking out some Fish, and slowly got familiar with their set lists, their material. So if you don't know, the comparisons with the Grateful Dead are what they do is in some ways similar to what the Dead did, in other ways kind of different. They never really considered themselves to be Deadheads. They considered themselves their two biggest influences. Um, in an interview I heard with Trey, were King Crimson and Frank Zappa. So what you get with Fish are kind of like with the Dead, their songs evolve into long improvisations. They're a little bit funkier than the Dead, but they can get pretty trippy and pretty spacey. But they can just get this incredible groove going. That's just like this blend of psychedelia and funk and like these heavy keyboards, and just when they really get going on a good jam, my God, it's just a beautiful thing to listen to. The band, um, so first saw them, like I said, I started listening to them in the early 2000s more seriously. I didn't actually go see my first Fish concert until 2011. They put on a great show. I try to catch them whenever they come around. Um, Usually, if you buy a ticket through their website, you also get a recording for download of the show. Most of their music's released on the streaming app these days. So, yeah, if you want to get into Fish, you got to take the deep dive into just years and years of these live recordings. Um, Real briefly, um, they toured continuously until the early 2000s. They had a brief hiatus, and then they returned to touring for about 2 more years. That's called Fish 2.0, and then a much longer break, um, several years, during which Trey Anastasio had his little whoopsie and his little scrape with law enforcement. Trey got sober. They returned to touring. That's Fish 3.0, and they've been touring continuously since then. So most people would say that their primo period were years like 97 and 98. And kind of like with the Dead, they began diving into archives, and you got like a series of live recordings. This is one of the best ones I think they put out. This is November 17th, 1997, McNichols Sports Arena, Denver, Colorado. Um, you also got an official live release. They've put out several live albums. This is one of them. It's called Slip, Stitch, and Pass, also from 1997. This is just some killer live Fish of them at their prime. All that said, I think I actually prefer listening to Fish 3.0. I feel like the band got tighter. Um, the jams, again, I'm going to make another comparison with the Dead. I love, you could argue that the best period for the Dead were like 73, 74. But man, those shows are long, and the jams could go on for like an hour. And I find that these days I don't really listen to that stuff much anymore. I tend to listen to more like early 80s where the Dead had kind of like worked out their set list, and there were a couple key songs that really were like where the jams would really happen, and they could kind of hit the sweet spot in about 10 or 15 minutes. And also maybe like early 70s, they could kind of do a similar thing, where I felt the shows were a little bit tighter. Same thing with Fish. I kind of feel like when they returned after their long absence, the shows were a little bit tighter. Um, they could kind of like hit the high points. I think they kind of knew how to do what they wanted to do, and it didn't take them all night to get there. So yeah, I tend to actually, I think I kind of preferred what Fish is doing these days. Um, I just think the band's a little bit tighter. One last thing, they did start putting out these a couple of years ago, which were they would put out LPs of just um, just jams. They would find like a couple of performances where they play one or two songs and just jam the hell out of it, and they looked for recordings that you could put out on one LP. This was the first one they put out. It was a pretty famous show in fish circles where they play a song called Ruby Waves. This happened, I think, in 2019, and the fish community was just all abuzz about this show where they just out of nowhere busted out this kind of obscure song and turned it into a 45-minute long space odyssey, which they now put out on vinyl for your listening pleasure. So that's kind of a new thing that's been going on in the Fish universe. So now I'm going to switch gears and talk about classical. I always do this in my videos. Most people don't listen to classical, so I save it to the end for those of you who are interested in this stuff to check this out. So I mentioned in my last video that we're starting to get a all analog audiophile series of pressings from Philips and Decca. I got the first one they've done. They've put out one batch, and I got the LP that I was interested in, which is Sibelius Symphonies 5 and 7 with Tapiola Tone Poem, conducted by Colin Davis, Boston Symphony from the 70s. And it lives up to the hype. My God, this thing sounds absolutely stupendous. These suckers are expensive. like like Deutsche Grammophone's original, whatever they call their analog, their all analog audiophile series, original source. That's what they call theirs. These suckers are expensive, but God, they do sound awfully good. So I mentioned this in the last video. I was waiting for it to show up in the mail. I got a chance to listen to it. It lives up to the hype. They sound amazing. If you're really into this music, treat yourself and get some of these. There's another batch of 3 coming out very shortly. I've already pre-ordered my copy. I'm interested in the Alpine Symphony conducted by George Schulte. That's the one I'm grabbing from the second batch of these. So I'm also going to do, real quick, a mini shootout. I've done this in a prior video where I try to keep down about 3 random recordings of famous pieces of classical and just kind of compare some different ones out there. And just, kind of a mini shootout. I'm not going to listen to like 20 different versions of Sibelius Symphony 5, but I can handle about 3. So tonight we're going to talk about Beethoven Symphony Number 7, and I'm going to compare Seiji Ozawa Sito Kainen Orchestra, very late period Ozawa, Andre Previn London Symphony Orchestra, originally on EMI, and this sucker, the very, very famous Carlos Kleiber Vienna Phil recordings. So general thoughts. Yeah, now that I think about it, my last video I did a shootout of three versions of Symphony 5. And I was going to say that in that case, I think I narrowly gave it to Ozawa. I felt like he's these are very swift period instrument influenced recordings, but not played on period instruments, but informed by that tradition. Very swift tempos, pretty exciting, well done. In this case, I'd say that I was less thrilled with the seven. It seemed kind of, I don't know, he was just kind of phoning it in. I felt like I was really impressed with his recording of number five. Number seven, same kind of thing. Tempos were very very quick, but it just didn't seem to quite have the, the that number five had. Complete. Previn, he takes tempos really slow, surprisingly slow. Sonically, this is by far the best of the three. Great recording. This is like one of those classic '70s, EMIs recorded in London when Previn was at his absolute peak. Um, Weird thing about this one, there's a real emphasis on the brass section. You can really hear the brass parts on this recording. That's cool because I heard things in the score I'd never really paid as much attention to. So this one's worth listening to. Yeah, I'd say it's worth listening to. Um, Tempos are kind of slow. I think I've already said all that. So I'm gonna say the winner would be Carlos, but I gotta be honest. I was less impressed with Symphony 7 than I was with number 5. I thought he really knocked it out of the park on Symphony 5. Symphony 7, I'm not as excited with this as other people seem to be. This is obviously, people rave about this recording. This is number 5. I thought the sound was a little bit dry. So I'd say of the three, this is the winner. But I'm going to go back to something that I mentioned in a video I did a while back. I was really impressed with George Schulte's recording from the '70s with Chicago. Normally, I'm not the biggest Schulte fan in the world, but that recording of number 7, man, is just, man, I thought he absolutely knocked it out of the park. I believe he won a Grammy for that recording, too. So, a couple other classical titles I'm going to mention real briefly. I was doing an order on Discogs a while back, and this sucker shows up on their site. Warner doesn't seem like they've quite gotten into the all analog thing like Deutsche Grammophone's done. They've made somewhat of an effort to, reissue stuff for the new vinyl era that we're living in. They don't seem like they've really embraced it the way that Deutsche Grammophone has. But they did put out this kind of miniature box set of recordings by Jacqueline Dupre, the famous Elgar cello concerto with the C pictures, Janet Baker. Here, let me show you what I'm talking about. Yeah, this famous recording. It's in this box set. I the real high point on this disc is the C pictures with Janet Baker. So these sound really good, but they're not all analog. They're definitely digitally sourced. That said, they sound awfully damn good. I was really surprised to see this. I didn't even know this box set was out there. I went ahead and picked it up just to see what it was like. And also, I really wanted to hear. I've really grown to appreciate Adrian Bolt's conducting. I feel like He is kind of like Britain's Eugene Ormandy. He just seems like he conducts everything really well. Um, yeah, not just British stuff, not just Vaughan Williams and Elgar. He's also got a really good touch with a lot of the German composers. And here we have him conducting Don Quixote by Richard Strauss, with of course Jacqueline Dupre on cello. Um, this was actually the real reason I got this box set. I wanted to hear this, and it didn't disappoint. An awfully fine rendition of Don Quixote. I really enjoyed it. Adrian Bolt knocks it out of the park once again. And I was also very surprised. I thought this was an awfully damn fine Dvorak cello concerto. Oh God, you just can't screw that piece up. It's so good. I've never heard it done bad. I mean, it's just hard. I don't think you can screw up this piece. It's just so damn good. But yeah, Jacqueline Dupre really, really just nails it. Yeah, I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of this, but a very, very fine rendition of the Dvorak cello concerto. So, real quickly, two other discs I'm going to just touch on real quick, and then we'll call it a night. Another very fine disc to keep your eyes open for. Back in I think in the 90s, we got this series where they plundered the BBC archives and you started seeing these discs showing up. BBC Radio Classics, where they just plundered the vaults and found all these old BBC recordings and they slapped them out on compact disc. This one is Mahler, Das Lied von der Erde, with Janet Baker and John Mitchison on vocals. Surprisingly, the BBC Northern Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Raymond Leppard. Not a guy that you think of when you think of Mahler. But by God, this is just a stupendous, and sonically, it's very good. I assume this is a radio broadcast, but it was what you call it, that famous place in Manchester, the God, what do you call it? Free Trade Hall, home of many famous concerts. Yeah, recorded in 1977 at the Free Trade Hall. Raymond Leppard, BBC Symphony Orchestra, Janet Baker, absolutely knock it out of the park on Das Lied von der Erde. So, if you're a Mahler fan, add this to your collection of many, many copies of Das Lied Das Lied von der Erde. You're like me, you probably got a dozen recordings of that piece because it's so great. And lastly, a conductor that's usually not known for Dvorak. I think this was recommended by David Hurwitz, but we got Bernard Haitink conducting Dvorak's Symphony 7 with the Bayreuth Symphony. And it is just an absolute ass kicker. It's so good. It's so exciting. It's so not what you get with Haitink. I love Haitink, but he tends to kind of hold back, and he tends to kind of wait for the big moments before he really drives the point home. This one, man, he is just on fire here. This is a stupendous recording. Yeah, I think David Hurwitz recommended this one, and I tracked it down. I'm just a huge Dvorak fan, and it did not disappoint. So, add this to your ridiculous collection of Dvorak recordings. You won't be disappointed. Yeah. So, anyway, that's what I got for tonight. Next time, we'll continue with my list of top 25 artists. Maybe I'll have some more record store day discs to talk about. And everyone, you all have a good night. Take care.